this great, truly, I feel it's an honor to be a part of this conversation, because I feel like every time I see the film, like I was just saying while you were trying to reboot, that this is probably like the 6th or 7th time I've seen it at least, and it doesn't stop me from wanting to see it again. And I'm not one of those types of people who like read books multiple times. Like for me, it's one and done. And there's something about this story that just, as a therapist, as a woman, as a person who holds the stories of so many people, there's just so much power in your story. And also just I take away a different lesson every single time. So thank you for, especially on today, on Mother's Day, which can be such a complex day for so many people. There's so much, there's sadness, there's hopefulness in this day. For some women, it's a final celebration of finally being that mother that they always anticipated. And I think it's just meaningful that we can spend a little bit of time together talking about these things. So hi again. Let's take a look at some of the questions that have been forwarded me, and I think really speaks to this kind of this world of fertility and infertility that people are trying to navigate. And I think I'm going to pick one that I feel like I hear this all the time. And I thought maybe you and I can kind of hash it out a little bit together. So I need to tell my friend that I'm pregnant, but I don't know how. Similar question I'm expecting, and my sister is about to start IVF. How can I support her? So this idea of how do I involve my family in, if I'm the one who's not struggling, but I have family or friends that are struggling, how do we have these conversations?
Yeah, we could, I mean, you probably deal with this a lot, work with this a lot too. And I just so remember that people felt like they were walking on eggshells around me. I think it's a really common feeling, like people don't really know what to say. And, you know, it just becomes a really hard thing. And sometimes I just felt like, why do I have to tell everybody how to be around me? You know,
Yes.
You just get like, I don't want, you know, but then I realized it is sort of important in some ways, or really helpful in order to stay connected, to be able to tell people what you need. And on the flip side, to be able to ask. I think there's no, you know, everybody just gets triggered by different things. Everybody has different ways of coping. And so I think the best thing for anybody to do is to be honest. I wouldn't, if you are pregnant, whether you're a sister or best friend or whoever, I wouldn't wait a long time. I remember I actually had a coworker, and she was one of the first, no, that's not true. I was one of the first people who she told she was pregnant. And I remember noticing that her roots were getting gray. So I kind of like had a suspicion, but it's like the minute she knew that it was, you know, viable or, you know, she was feeling comfortable, she pulled me aside and she just like, I just need to tell you, you know, and she's like, I understand, you know, I know everything you've been going through and I just want to tell you. And she's like, I'm telling you before I'm telling my mom, you know, is how it felt. And for some reason that felt so special to me, that she recognized the importance of holding space for, you know, that I was happy for her. I genuinely was. And I needed to be able to hold that space of happiness for her and sadness for myself at the same time. Right. And it's really conflicting. And you know, it's like, I wasn't, you know, at times I felt shameful about how I was feeling. You know, it's like, I didn't want to be jealous. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want to feel like people were getting pregnant against me. And that's how it sometimes just feels, yes, you know, you're like, right. And I'm like, oh my God, this is not rational. I know it, but you can't help sometimes just feeling super sad and it's hard. And so I think the best thing that family and friends can do is to just ask, you know, just to be honest, you know, if you are pregnant, but also if you're trying to help somebody with what support will work for them. It's just being able to say like, I know this is really hard, and, you know, tell me how I can be helpful. What is it that you need? What's the best language to use? How can I be sensitive?
Recognizing that they may not always have the answer, but even just the asking says that I'm trying to connect to you on an empathic and appropriate way, and I may still get it wrong. You know, I recently had a moment where I texted, a client of mine texted me the most gorgeous photo of a bird's nest with 3 beautiful robin's eggs in them. And I was so taken by it. And we were talking about how to like ground, and I'm talking with another client about grounding and certain things about noticing nature. Without thinking about it, I texted her this photo of this bird's nest with 3 eggs. And the first thing I thought was like, oh my gosh, I just texted her like creation and birth and she, you know, and I texted her back immediately. I said, I don't know, I may have just made a mistake. And if this was painful to you, then I apologize and please forgive me. And it was sweet because she responded and she said, yeah, I've long ago stopped being jealous of the birds. But, I think that sometimes we have to have that honest, open conversation with I may hurt you, or this may have hurt. And please, help me learn how to do it better. Sometimes I'll also have clients be open to, instead of me calling or texting, but then also saying, and I'm going to allow you the space to just kind of digest that information. And it's okay if we don't talk about it, or it's okay if we do talk about it again, and I will follow your lead. Because people are I can have one person who wants this and one person who hates that, and right. Can you talk a little bit about that jealousy line? Like you said, I don't feel what kind of person am I that I feel sometimes jealous?
It's so hard because and I guess jealousy is the right word. Sometimes it's jealousy, sometimes it's envy, sometimes it's frustration, sometimes it's just confusion. It's like, I'm so happy for you, and I'm so glad you're not struggling, but also, why am I struggling? And I think jealousy, it's just a really natural and normal part of the process sometimes. And trying to, I guess for me also, just like, when is it going to be my turn? When is it going to be my turn? And it's like, every time somebody else got pregnant, somehow it felt like there was this like finite amount of babies or something. And like, I wasn't going to get one, and it's trying to just remember, like, everybody's got their own process, and, trying to just ground myself in the things that I'm grateful for. And I just had a mantra. I was like, I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to be a mom. And, my heart was open to how that would be, and I think, just trying to welcome that, and to allow yourself, if you feel jealousy, just name it. Just be like, okay, this is jealousy and I don't love this feeling, but I'm not going to pretend like it's not there. I'm just going to sort of like nurture it and then move through it, and hopefully come out on another side where it can transform into, I want what somebody else has, but I want it for myself, and it will happen for me in my own way, in my own time, and just kind of getting a little bit more confident. I think when your world gets so shaken up by, oh my gosh, is this ever going to work for me? You lose a lot of confidence in everything, in the process, in yourself, in your body, in your relationship, all of these things. And it's just like, oh my gosh, can this just like stop, Right. But I think trying to find a way to feel more confident about your process, and just more hopeful that, somehow we're going to figure this out,
How did you do that though? What was your process? Like, could you name it? Can you identify it? Was the filming your process?
I think a lot of, for me also, I think sharing was really helpful. And I know this comes up a lot for people, do I tell people what I'm going through? And this, I guess, goes back to some of the questions too about, like, how do people support me? And what do I say? And should I share or should I not share? And is this private? And, there are all these things kind of wrapped up, but I started writing a blog. I don't know how to use the computer clearly. Like, I don't I'm not on any social media or anything, but I started a blog. I started writing, and I didn't know who I was writing to. I was just like, okay, here I am. But I started connecting to other people who were going through similar things. And that to me felt like I was able to turn lemons into lemonade in a different way. And so, and filming was a part of it too. I know that really helped my husband. Documenting, somehow validates the experience in some way. And I think, part of why I feel like our film connects to people is because it really is. And, I say this, you've heard me say this before, but it's a version of so many different people's stories. We all have, so people can connect. And I think what's so hard is this isolation that fertility patients all feel. And, I don't want to say all, but I can probably say a lot of people feel really isolated, really alone, even though there are, over 7 million people in the US alone, dealing with some form of struggle in some way. But just being able to feel connected to other people helped me learn to manage all of the feelings that came up in different ways. And listen, sometimes there's a hot mess. I mean, it's on film, it's legit. Like, I was a hot mess, and, and there were, I was very, very like deeply sad and wounded at different times. And I felt very angry at other times. And, you know, I think it's honoring that these feelings are there and that it's okay to have these feelings. And it's very normal to have these feelings. And it's just trying to like shift gears somehow. So you kind of give space, you kind of sit in it sometimes and you go, okay, here I am. I'm going to cry this out. I'm going to just lock it down. And then you go, okay, I need to like be in the world. I need to live how I want to live. I need to open my heart to how my family's going to come together and just do the best that I can. And sometimes that's, you know, deciding that you're not going to go to baby showers or do certain things. And it's sort of giving yourself permission to take care of yourself and try to work to stay connected to the people you know care about you and work through those relationships as much as possible. And I don't know, I think I'm talking too much, but.
No, you're never talking. I'm like, I'm just like absorbing it all. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that for you, this, what you just described so eloquently? I think about the people that are actually post-treatment, right? And the people that are, you know, that you have arrived, you know, the film ends at that moment where nothing got wrapped up in a perfect bow at all, but there's definitely this moment where you have arrived post-birth. And I think about like all of this process that came through and that you went through in order to get there. Can you talk a little bit about like the residual, I'm going to use that word trauma, because I think for many people will internalize this experience as a trauma. Can you talk a little bit about like, it's not just like, okay, when I had that baby, now everything was fine and we're all better now. Yeah. Talk a little bit about what came next. I think it's important to acknowledge that idea, like infertility so completely absorbs the identity. It isn't just a process, it's an identity development. You said that you begin to lose part of like the living in the world beyond infertility and beyond trying to have a child. So talk a little bit about that post facto process for yourself and what that was like.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that today, because we drove to my parents' house. My parents live like maybe 45 minutes away, and we haven't seen them since quarantine started, but I just brought a strawberry shortcake and some flowers, and we're going to sort of go in the backyard and do the whole mask. This is such a bizarre time.
We did the exact same thing today with my parents. So
bizarre. As we were driving up right past my fertility clinic. And it's so interesting because I sort of live on the other side of town, so I don't go past there. And the second, it's always the same. We're driving up a street called La Cienega, and once we passed Wilshire, my eyes started to tear, you know, and I mean, we're 6 years post or 5 years post plus the pregnancy. Right. So, and I just like, I looked at Noah and I was like, you know, even now my eyes are tearing, right? It just, it stays with you. The smell of the office, the door, the way you have to ring in to get in, you know, like the whole thing. And it's just something that, you know, sometimes it's like I'm in it. Mika's 5 now, so I'm in it with her, and I'm grateful all the time. And there are moments where I'm still surprised, you know, where I go like, oh, you know, but
there it is.
When I think about just the time right after, you know, I had a lot of anxiety, and I think it's really common, and I think it's important to normalize sort of the postpartum stuff, you know, and I kind of felt like, you know, you're tired anyways, but I felt like something about the journey that taking so much longer sort of was like emotionally exhausting.
Yeah.
And having to like figure out how to catch up and how to just like figure out how to be. And I think I really struggled with the idea of being deserving of her for a long time, you know. It's now, you know, I'm doing sort of work in the embryo donation world now. And I, you know, started an education organization called Empower Donation. And so much of what we talk about and is like, you know, you kind of, you get there and then you just have this, it's not real for so long. And then I felt like, do I deserve to have this child? She's so strong. She's so healthy. She's so beautiful and amazing. And I had to really work on my own confidence as a parent, kind of. And only then could I kind of come around and go like, okay, we're good. You know, but it took time, and it's become such a part of me and my work now and all of that. And it was a very life-changing experience that was really hard, and then came out just a really important part, and I wouldn't change anything about it. You know, I think you just have to sort of value the experience. And, you know, there's some parts where I go, I could have done without that maybe, you know, but for the most part, everything that happened sort of had to happen to get us to where we are. And I think most people who go through a process like this kind of feel similarly in some way sometimes, where when in it, you're like, get me out. But when you kind of get to the other side, yes, there's residual, but you also go, okay, I understand how I got here.
Right. Right. Or I may never understand why I had to go through that in order to get here. But because I'm here now, that became part of my story, became part of my identity. I think it's a value. I think it's such a critical thing to remember, that it is always part of who I am, but how much it is a part of who I am is dependent on each person and kind of what their process is in getting through that experience. And I always appreciate when you bring about the postpartum, kind of concern. And we know that women that are post infertility treatment are at very high risk for a diagnosis of postpartum anxiety or depression. So, which is almost like, wait, but you worked so hard to get here. How come you're having such a hard time with it? And yet we know that this is just a complicated transition for many mothers and for these mothers as well. So very, very valuable.
And I think that expectation too, it's like, I think maybe I did expect to give birth and feel like, oh, okay, here I am, everything's good. And I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
Right. I was kind of wrecked after that whole experience. Anyway, then I was like, wait, this is like hard. And I think sometimes people, when I wasn't complaining, but I was just like surprised somehow. I thought I'd be better as a new mom than I was, or something like that, and I was like, oh my God, I suck. Like, you gotta be kidding me.
Right.
All this, I suck.
Right. And also, like, do I have the right to complain? Right. Because I worked so hard to get here. I can't complain. I can't say that I'm tired. I can't have a single thing of like complaint or fetch about it, because I worked so hard to get here.
And then the feedback often is, well, isn't this what you wanted? This is what you wanted. What did you think? And you're like, listen,
right.
I struggled. Doesn't mean I don't have a right to feel what I feel.
Exactly. Especially when they become teenagers, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm not there.
I know. Can you address the issue? You and I have talked multiple times about Noah in the film, and your relationship with Noah, I think, really there's something very, very powerful that exists between the two of you. Wondering if you could address that. One of our kind of comments was a question from the chat, was talking about the stress between you and your husband, fights, any anger, negotiating blame, or not seeing eye to eye. You presented a picture that was very, very beautiful and very heartwarming in a relationship. I think that there is definitely the distinct opposite, where we have people there, women are the one who are saying like, we need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And the husbands are like, I'm done. I need to be done. Or the husband is the one who says, can we do one more round? And the wife is like, I'm shredded. I can't do more. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between you and Noah, either individually or also like how you would kind of encourage couples more broadly to navigate that process?
Yeah, I always think to that scene where we're sitting on, I know where the room is in my house. We're sort of sitting on the floor. My skin is awful. That's what stands out to me most about that scene. But he's like, we got to pause. We got to take a break. And I'm like, it never stops for me, and that was, we don't fight. I mean, I have an incredibly patient, kind husband. So I got very lucky in that department. He would probably not say the same thing about me, but those were the kinds of things that would get us stuck, that my obsession or I couldn't turn this off. I was driving the ship, and he was like, we gotta pull over for a second, and I was like, so those were the hardest times when we just weren't on the same page. We'd been together for a decade before any of this happened. So I think that helped us, we grew up together. We met when we were in college. So it's like we sort of had this foundation of he knew who I was and that I was just in a really bad way. So it wasn't like, what am I, is this it? It was sort of like, okay, I know your foundation, and this has just like destroyed it in a lot of ways. Right. But I think what's so important is figuring out how to be in the relationship under this kind of stress. And we didn't know how to do that in the beginning. It's like, I carried a lot of the anxiety I do anyways in our relationship. And he just was kind of chill about it. And that wasn't working for me. I was like, you need to raise your anxiety level just so I'm not holding all of it, please.
Right.
But I think also it was honoring that we have very different ways of processing, of coping, of talking about it. We have different needs. I like to talk about it and think about it and have plan A, B, and C, and all of these things. I'm like I'm a bit intense, believe it or not. And he's just a little bit more like, well, let's see what happens. And then when we have to like, think about it, then we'll move forward. And, and so it was kind of like, no, do it my way, so I feel better, like,
Yes.
and, part of this was going like, okay, this is what he needs, and this is what I need. How can we work together and figure some of this out? How can we also take breaks? Like, I think I was so constant about this until we figured this out. We were going to talk about it all the time,
Right.
And we had to go, you know what, today we're going to a concert, or we're doing something different. We're thinking about, it's off limits. So it's sort of like trying to protect the relationship within the sort of bigger picture of the struggle, and honoring the different ways that each person communicates their sadness. Just because he wasn't crying all the time doesn't mean he wasn't sad,
Right.
Or I'm like, how can you go to work and be normal? And he's like, because I can compartmentalize.
Right.
Because that's a skill of his, where I'm just like, oh, so, it's just different. And I think it's like, if knowing your differences and being able to talk about them, I think really helps to kind of sort it all out.
Yeah. I think I want to also like kind of just zero in for a minute on what you talked about in terms of preserving the relationship independent of the infertility. Sure, that, like you said, and you describe, and in many ways you might feel that way about the film, as like, it was everything in the only thing. And I think it's so critical for us to always remember that the marriage, the relationship, the partnership is so important to be there as a deep foundation, no matter what happens outside of that partnership. And, things like spending time alone together where those things are off limits, or going out and finding things that are joyful. I think one of the hardest parts about that is like the ability to afford it, right? I'm not talking, dinner's one thing, going to Hawaii is another. And like this process absorbs, right? Exactly. Like this process like absorbs all your money, but like even those few hours of the week where you can put aside time as a couple that we don't talk about these topics, one of them being infertility or having a child, and remembering the things that make us a couple to begin with are really crucial, because at the end of the day, when you do reach your desire, dream, and goal, we still want to make sure the marriage and relationship is intact, and just to not forget the marriage or the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and fights happen. And I think there were these moments where I'm like, I can't fight with this guy. He's all I've got right now. It's like, we've like boarded up the windows and we're just hanging on for dear life. And like, that's it,
Right. So, talk about quarantine. I mean, isn't that the same thing that we're dealing with right now? It's like, he's it. Yeah.
It felt like that a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes the things that he would say just, I think I had, it's the same thing in a way. It's like, I kind of had to teach him what was going to work for me. And he had to help me learn what he needed. I think so. Part of that was I needed him to not tell me everything was going to be okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes there's the cheerleader in the relationship, and then there's the one who's struggling sort of more or something, right? And that like, we're going to figure it out, or we're going to, and I was just like, just stop telling me it's going to be okay. Just sit in the bad space with me for a little bit.
Right.
And once he sort of had permission to not have to be like the rock or something like that, he can just say like, this sucks. Right. We are going to figure it out, because he believed that in his heart. And I did too. I just lost way of that sometimes. Right. But I think, me being able to just say like, stop telling me it's going to be okay. Like, I don't care that it's going to be okay, because it doesn't feel okay right now. Stay with me where it feels, and for him, he just needed space sometimes. Like, he needed to breathe. That's why I think for him, being behind the camera was really therapeutic, because it gave him space from my emotions,
physical barrier.
Yeah. And also for us, I think as a couple, creating was a really interesting part of this, that we could like make this together. So we'd like have this terrible day sort of, or this, and then we'd like look at the footage together, and I'd be like, okay, well, so what does this mean? Like, how do we make this a story that, and it's like, so I don't know. There was something in that too. I think that was part of
I love that. I think also just one quick comment, and then we'll take one more question. If anybody wants to post it in the chat, we're open to one more question, and then we'll give it a close. But I think also when you bring that up, that idea of one of the things that can be also a little complicated is a woman or a man needs to know their own needs in order to communicate that to their partner. So you had to know what you needed from him. And I find that sometimes women haven't yet figured out what their own needs are. And so making sure that you begin to identify, what do I truly need from him or her in order to fully kind of embrace this communication pattern. Like I can't know but to tell my partner what I need if I myself don't know what's going to fill me up or what's going to support myself. Absolutely. And so that like kind of self-attunement and self-awareness is so important. Yeah. So one of the questions that was raised here, and this will be our last one for the night. I'm curious whether we have any contact with the couple that donated the embryo.
It's a really interesting question because it's sort of the crux of my new project and what I'm working on. And so the embryo, it was an anonymous embryo donation, and anonymous sort of in quotes. And we got the embryo at a clinic. I don't know how to talk about that. We got the embryo. It just sounds so bizarre, but it was from a clinic, and a lot of clinics have anonymous embryo donation programs. And it's been kind of an interesting journey because at the time I didn't think that much about it. I assumed that I'd be able to like write a thank you letter and the clinic would give it to that couple and maybe we'd be able to connect and stuff like that. And I learned later that the couple wasn't even allowed to know if a pregnancy occurred. And I learned kind of a lot of different things about how embryo donation is done at clinics when it is sort of an anonymous program, and what Empower Donation, this sort of new organization that I co-founded, is all about empowering choice in embryo donation. And part of that is working to sort of resolve some of the issues around anonymous conception in that way. Mm-hmm. But I did go on the consumer DNA testing sites, and that, I sort of struggled with whether or not to do it, but I decided, I would really like to connect if other people would. And our daughter was conceived with an anonymous egg donor. And then there's the couple who used that egg donor to create the embryos. So it's sort of like there are two donors. So there's the couple that donated the embryo, and then that couple that used the egg donor. And I actually connected with the egg donor. I wrote her today. I just wrote her thanking her for, helping me get here to where I am today. And she's a lovely woman and has 3 children of her own and stuff. And so we've connected, and I was able to learn a little bit more about the embryo donors, but I haven't connected with them. And I'd like to just have that open line if, for the future and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting. And that my 2 partners in this endeavor, Empower Donation endeavor, are both embryo donors themselves who have chosen their recipients or matched with their recipients and stuff. So they have a really different relationship where everybody's known to each other, and so there's a lot of different possibilities for how you build your family, obviously. And I think that's the message of hope that we really hope translates. There are a lot of ways families can come together, and Yesh Tikva does amazing work to just support the community. And so thank you, Gila, for having me. And I don't know if there are more questions, but I
think we'll close on that. It's only 10:20 at night here on the East Coast. I know you guys are 3 hours behind. But Maya, thank you again. I do hope, and I am sure we will see each other again in the future, and continue to see the good work that you're doing. Truly amazing. Feel free to email any additional questions onto Gila at Yesh Tikva, and we're always happy to kind of forward questions on either to me or to Gila. She'll make sure that they get answered. I'm truly grateful for you to being here tonight and for continuing this conversation. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you, Gila. Any last words? Oh, and if any, want to mention the support groups, Gila?
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Special thank you to Dvora, and a special thank you to Maya. West Coast time, 3 hours ahead. It's a rush time of evening. So thank you to both of you for being here tonight. And thank you to all of you who have joined us. We have 3 support groups coming up. C3 for women facing primary infertility, C3 for secondary infertility, as well as a new C3 for men. They will be next week, Monday, Wednesday, and the following week, the 31st for men, as well as a new support group about to launch for women parenting post-ART. So email us, events@yeshtikva.org. We will email you with more information as well. We're always here for you. Please never hesitate to reach out. Special thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Yeah.